My name's Brett O'Reilly. I'm the Chief Executive here at the EMA, and thank you for joining us today for this pre-budget session with the Honourable Nicola Willis, our Minister of Finance. Great to have you here, Minister, and I know that you have been a regular attendee of EMA events in the past when you were the opposition spokesperson for finance, so it's great to have you in the House today on the eve of what is an incredibly important budget for New Zealand. I don't intend to make too many remarks. I'm going to leave that to Ian Sargent from NIB, who's going to introduce you, but I will just make a couple of quick comments. Firstly, can I thank our members for coming today? I know there's keen interest in what's happening in the economy, and you're not going to get better insight into that than we will today from the Minister of Finance. I think this is the worst downturn that I've experienced since the early 1990s, and I'm old enough to remember that. And I think some of the circumstances are not altogether dissimilar to that, but I won't go into all of that. And I want to say, because I don't often make these comments, but I personally support the tax cuts because I see the impact that this downturn is having on our members and on their staff every day. And so things are tough out there, and we hear that from everyone that we talk to. So I know it's a moot point for many people, but I certainly think for working New Zealanders, it's pretty tough out there. So I think they're going to appreciate the relief, and hopefully that'll be the signal for some long-term rebalancing of the way we tax people. A bit of housekeeping. Many of you will be familiar with the EMA. There's tea and coffee at the back, so if any of you would like to grab some of that, please do. In the event of an emergency, down the stairs that you probably came up, and will assemble in the car park just outside the Red Cross building, which seems very appropriate in an emergency. We are not recording this session, but there are media present, as you will have seen, so just be aware that if you ask a question, you might be recorded or photographed, so make sure you get your good side for that. If you do need to use bathroom facilities, out those doors and on the right-hand side, just in the right-hand corner, the facilities are there. Can I also just say, because I always forget this, to thank my team at the EMA just for bringing this event together and organising everything. And can I also acknowledge our former president, Andrew Hunt, who's here today. Colin Birch, our current president, is in Europe. And can I acknowledge some of our EMA board members here. I see Aston from Briscoe's here. I'm not sure if there's anyone else, but thanks for coming along today. I'm just going to I guess finish my comments by saying I think we all realise that much of this budget is about austerity and about having to deal with some previous issues. But we will continue as the EMA to advocate for growth, because that is the only way that New Zealand is going to get out of this situation. We support the government's views about their target to doubling exports, and when the Prime Minister was here in the last few weeks, we talked a lot about that. We continue to advocate for accelerated depreciation because we know that productivity is linked to investment in things like technology, and that by all the measures that we see in New Zealand, rates very low in terms of automation per employee. So there'll be things that we'll continue to advocate for, and I know that in the coming months after the budget, there's going to be a lot of focus on economic growth and where that comes from. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to hear from the Minister. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ian Sargent from NIB. NIB are a fantastic partner of the EMA's. We've worked together for a long time on a range of different things, including our recent workplace wellbeing survey, which I think we had a record number of people responding to. Probably no surprise given how wellbeing feels in the workplace at the moment. But anyway, please join me in welcoming Ian Sargent.
Kia ora koutou, nau mai, haere mai, nau mai, whakatau mai. as Brett alludes to, we have a very long-standing relationship with the EMA and are proud to be able to play a small part in bringing today's event together. The focus of all of that is always about achieving better health outcomes for Kiwi employers and their employees. Brett alluded to that workplace wellbeing survey. We last did it 2 years ago, and it has just gone out again and been well responded to, but it shed light on some confronting statistics for the New Zealand workplace. As an example, 87% of respondents in 2022 told us that in the 3 months leading up to that survey, they'd experienced negative emotional and psychological impacts as a result of their work. That's not why people go to work, and as employers, we all have a collective responsibility to support them through that. Today, the many organisations that choose NIB to provide their employer-funded health plans tell us about the challenges that they face in their business. You know, yes, unemployment has risen and perhaps some of the heat has gone out of the labour market, but getting good people is still really tricky. And Minister, I think the business community wholeheartedly welcomed a change in government, but change does create short-term anxiety, short-term uncertainty, and we do hear from businesses who are anxious, I guess, as they wait to see what impact new policy settings will have on their respective operations. And of course, the ongoing cost pressures, right? We hear all the time about inflation, what that does to your business, to ours, and to the whole country. And I guess the RBNZ announcement yesterday did little to quell some of those fears. But we also believe there is great reason to be optimistic. As we heard from Prime Minister Luxon in this room only a month ago, this is a government who have made it very clear that there lies great opportunity for Kiwi business to work with the public sector, to work in partnership with iwi, with community, to achieve better outcomes in your specific field. In our world, in the health sector, we believe that that industry is ripe for the opportunity to partner, and we're very proud of our relationship. You've heard plenty about this before with Ngāti Whātua Rākei, working with iwi to bridge the gap between public and private provision of healthcare, trying to connect some of those dots and ultimately deliver better health outcomes for that population. So, 1 week out from the National Government's first budget, like you, I'm eagerly waiting and anticipating what's in store. I'm standing here, Minister, holding my breath to hear that FBT will be removed from employer-funded health plans, that there'll be tax incentives for Kiwis that take out private health insurance, because in doing so, they're lessening the burden on the public system. But I also stand here empathetic to the challenge that you face. As Brett alludes to, there are many mouths crying out to be fed, and I think what this country needs more than most at this time is clear, consistent decision-making that paints the picture of how we will return to a more prosperous economy. So to that end, thank you for making the time to be with us today, for showing up for New Zealand business, and we wish you very well in your term in government. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, ngā nui kia koutou katoa. Tāmaki heringa waka, tāmaki heringa tangata. Ngā mihi ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohi. Ngāti whātua o Ōrake, me ngā iwi katoa kua tai mai. Mauri ora. Greetings, everyone. Thank you to the EMA for hosting this event. Let me acknowledge you, Andrew Hunt, as Chair of Business New Zealand, Brett O'Reilly, EMA Chief Executive, together with your board members, and all the businesses, employers, and community leaders in the room today. Thanks to all of you, not only for attending, but for what you do. Our government recognises that business is the engine of the economy. It is business, not government, that generates income to fund health, education, and welfare services. It is business, not government, that employs most New Zealanders. And it is business, not government, that will drive the productivity and innovation on which New Zealand's future depends. Let me also acknowledge the social sector organisations represented here today. It is so often these non-government groups that are getting on and solving the complex challenges in our communities, turning good intentions for our most vulnerable into real results. Thank you for what you do. New Zealand's future is important to everyone here today, and it's important to me personally. I say that, of course, as Minister of Finance, but also as a proud New Zealander and as a mother who would like her kids to see their future here too. This is the place that I, like you, have chosen to raise my family and build a life and career. I have lived here in Auckland and I have lived in Wellington. And I could compare the two, but that would require discussing what Treasury nicely refers to as high-quality wind resources. Our government is working hard to restore confidence in New Zealand. We want to remove barriers to people investing their own money in creating and growing businesses. We want to work with investors and firms to get on with building the infrastructure projects this country so badly needs. We want to remove unnecessary red tape. We want to ensure that young people leave the education system with the skills they need to make the most of their talents. We want to open doors for you overseas. Our government has a resolutely pro-growth agenda, and we are working at pace to change policies for the better. Ministers will have more to say in these sorts of areas over the coming weeks and months. Today, I want to give you an overview of how the coalition government is approaching our first budget, what we are working to achieve, and why that matters to you. Let me start, however, by acknowledging how challenging economic conditions are for so many Kiwis right now. New Zealand is experiencing a difficult economic downturn. The post-COVID-19 party, fuelled by ultra-low interest rates and large amounts of government spending, is now a distant memory. Inflation climbed quickly in 2021, reached multi-decade highs in 2022, and has not yet come back to the target range. Now that the laws of economic gravity have reasserted themselves, New Zealanders are faced with the cost of cleaning up. This is the hangover after the wild party. And as everyone knows, the wilder the party, the longer and messier the hangover. Well, not everyone knows that, but I can tell some of you do. A long period of fast rising prices has eroded people's purchasing power, reduced the values of their savings, and sapped confidence. The Reserve Bank has moved to control inflation with a substantial lift in interest rates. Economic activity has flattened and output has fallen sharply on a per-person basis. This is causing considerable pain for households and businesses throughout New Zealand. You see this in your own businesses and in your own lives. And we also see this in the government's books. Tax revenue forecasts have dropped considerably, making it a lot harder for us to get the books in good shape. Doing so will take several years and lots of hard work to make savings and reprioritise spending. All of this, of course, makes for one heck of a backdrop to our government's first budget. And my sense is that New Zealanders are realistic about the task our government faces. No one is asking us to wave a magic wand, because there isn't one. Instead, people are looking for us to show a clear, credible path out of this economic and fiscal mess. You are looking for a little relief today, but most importantly, you need the hope that tomorrow will be better. And that is what our budget will do. As Minister of Finance, I am very aware of the economic forces our government cannot control, at least in the short term. But there are things we can control. And one of those is fiscal policy, the management of government revenue, expenses and borrowing. Fiscal policy matters for real people, as recent history shows. The last few years have been something of an experiment to see what happens when the government fires money around in pursuit of transformational goals. The result has been high inflation, large deficits, growing debt, a struggling economy, and nothing remotely transformational to show for it. If bad fiscal policy can make things worse for businesses and people, then good policy can make it better. And you'll see on the 30th of May next week that we have taken a very fiscally responsible approach in the budget. We had to. Over the last few years, government expenses have risen markedly. Some of this spending, of course, reflected temporary measures to support New Zealand through COVID-19 and subsequent weather events, but much of it proved not to be temporary. After stripping out large one-off expenses and adjusting for the economic cycle, the Treasury estimates a structural operating deficit of around 1.5% of GDP in the current financial year. Structural deficit is a technical term. More colloquially, New Zealand is paying for the groceries, and we are borrowing to do that. New Zealand is borrowing to pay for the groceries. And that is not sustainable in the long term, as it requires continual borrowing to cover expenses, leading to a never-ending debt spiral. So, we have had to make a series of careful decisions in our first budget that mean we can get the books back in order and get debt tracking down again. This task has become much harder to achieve as economic forecasts have deteriorated. For a while, it seemed like every time Treasury came to see me, they brought with them a revised set of GDP forecasts, revised down, that is, and each revision has made the fiscal challenge harder. Nonetheless, the government is deliberately taking a medium-term approach to fiscal consolidation. We will not be overreacting to changes in the forecasts. We're not doing that on the current economic downswing, and we won't do that on the upswing either. We will be making difficult decisions and trade-offs to turn the fiscal situation around, get back to surplus and reduce debt, but we want to look after New Zealanders on the way. The details of that will be set out in the budget. In particular, we will set out the operating allowances for future budgets. These allowances represent the amount available in the next 3 budgets for discretionary spending and revenue initiatives. They are the key tool the government has for controlling growth in spending and driving savings and reprioritisation. And as I said, the size of those allowances will be set out in the budget. But what I can tell you is that in the current economic circumstances, if we were to continue with the spending allowances set by the previous government, the operating balance would not get back to surplus until the year 2030-31. That is too far off in the future. And as a responsible government, we will certainly not be doing that. We will be getting back to surplus sooner. But, in the words from a Florence and the Machine song I quoted recently, it is darkest before the dawn. The deficit is expected to be larger next year than it is this year before starting to improve. This reflects for the most part the deterioration in the economy and downgrades to the forecasts for GDP and tax revenue. It does not reflect the government's fiscal decisions in the budget. Let me now address 2 economic issues I know are top of mind for all of you: high inflation and high interest rates. These challenges are top of mind for our government too. Getting government spending under control will support monetary policy to bring inflation within target and maintain it there. The Reserve Bank, as you know, does the heavy lifting on inflation, but the government can help the task or it can hinder it. We will be helpers. We will be delivering tax relief in the budget. It will be relatively modest, but it is long overdue. Inflation and wage growth have pushed many people into higher tax brackets, meaning they are paying a greater share of their income in tax. I'll give you an example. In 2011, the median full-time wage and salary worker earned $48,000 and paid 15.5% of their income in tax. Today, despite tax thresholds not being adjusted, the median full-time wage and salary worker earns $73,400 and pays 20.6% of their income in tax. That uplift in the overall rate of tax is the consequence of not adjusting tax thresholds for 14 years. The average tax rate for someone who, by definition, is right in the middle of the income distribution has gone up by more than 5 percentage points. And that is not fair. People deserve a break, and they need to see a future for themselves and their families in New Zealand, a future in which, if they work hard, they can get ahead. And the link to inflation is this. Tax relief in the budget will be fully funded from savings and other revenue initiatives. Contrary to what you might hear from some quarters, it will not require additional borrowing. Since tax relief will be fully paid for, it should actually, at the margin, take a bit of pressure off inflation, given that households may save some of their tax relief rather than spend it all. More importantly, we will be reining back spending in future years and maintaining an overall contractionary fiscal stance. Treasury has advised me that this means that interest rates could track lower than would otherwise be the case. I know how important it is for every Kiwi with a mortgage and every business carrying debt. Our government has your back, and we will do our bit to support a lower interest rate future. Reining back spending over time does mean that savings and reprioritisation will be business as usual activities for our government. They will be a feature of future budgets, just as they are of Budget 2024. The government will continue to seek out areas of less effective government spending so we can redeploy resources to frontline services to get better results from schools, hospitals and other essential services. We will look carefully at our costs and be much harder-edged about what is necessary and what are nice to haves. We will find the headroom to fund future priorities without adding to debt. I imagine that this approach just sounds like common sense to the business people in this room. It's no different from what many of you have done in your businesses in these tough economic times. You've gone line by line through your spending to decide what costs can be reduced so that you can keep funding the things that really matter and that will drive your business forward. For some reason, governments have found this exercise very difficult. Our government has to do it because the alternative is fiscal vandalism. In the budget, you will see the extent of the savings we have already made. As I said, tax relief in the budget will be fully funded through savings and revenue initiatives, and those initiatives will be broadly similar to those the National Party campaigned on at the election, adjusted to reflect commitments made in our coalition agreements. There will also be other savings in the budget, quite significant ones. What I think is less understood by commentators is that our savings go well beyond tax relief. The government is making active choices to stop some areas of spending so that we can redeploy those funds to better use in frontline public services and other government priorities. We've already announced some of those decisions. We announced an extra $571 million to upgrade ageing defence equipment and infrastructure and to improve remuneration for service women and men. $100 million of that is being reprioritised from back office defence functions. We announced an additional $1.9 billion for more corrections officers, increased support for offenders to turn away from crime, and additional prison capacity so that our police and courts can have confidence that we can more strongly sentence those who imperil the safety of our communities. Almost $442 million of that has come from savings found in the back office. We've also worked carefully to find the money for the school lunch program, which was left unfunded by the last government. We're going to use commercial expertise and innovation to make that program more efficient, and that will save taxpayers around $107 million. That will then make room to allow us to fund a targeted program to provide food for around 10,000 2 to 5-year-olds who attend low equity, not-for-profit, community-based early learning services. You'll see many more examples like this, examples of reprioritisation in the budget next week and in budgets to come. This is what sensible families and businesses already do, and it's about time the government caught up. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Our budget will also make investments for future growth. We have an infrastructure deficit in New Zealand and more challenges lie ahead. Our climate is changing. New Zealand must invest now, not only to reduce carbon emissions with more renewable energy and lower emission transport options, but also to build the stock banks, seawalls and flood protection schemes needed for resilience. Our government is ambitious about delivering the infrastructure New Zealand needs, not just talking about it, but actually building it. We recognise that this will require increased government investment, and you can expect an uplift in capital funding in the budget. But it is about more than dollars. The previous government allocated significant levels of capital funding in recent budgets, with an investment pipeline larger and lumpier than agencies and the market could deliver, as evidenced by significant cost escalations and delivery delays. Haphazard planning and consenting made for some incredibly poorly thought through projects, like the IREX ferry project, or the extensive critique from the Auditor General of the New Zealand UP program. And it also meant that other much talked about projects, think Auckland Light Rail, never moved beyond the design stage. Our government will maintain a more stable and sustainable investment pipeline. We will embrace fast-track legislation, private capital and long-run planning to build more projects for the future. In our budget, we have funded a modest number of high-quality investments and ensured funding for the extensive transport agenda already signalled in our government policy statement, including 15 roads of national significance. We have also deliberately put aside a significant sum of funding to support additional future infrastructure projects, not yet agreed, which we can fund when they reach the investment-ready stage. Aligned with this work on hard infrastructure, our government is taking a new approach to social spending. The social investment agency I am establishing is designed to disrupt the cosy complacency that for too long has characterised much of the government's social service delivery. I share your frustration with an approach that has repeatedly put large government bureaucracies at the centre of expensive programs, strategies and action plans, all started with good intentions to help our most vulnerable, but too often failing to move the dial. So, we know that it is non-government organisations working on the ground that have some of the best ideas and who know our communities best. We want more of the impact they deliver. So we are thinking differently and starting a social investment fund to drive change. Social impact bonds, devolution, social outcome contracts, it's all on the table. Ladies and gentlemen, New Zealand has so much going for it. We are located in the fastest growing region of the world. We have a stable democracy, peaceful borders, clean air, a rapidly growing Māori economy, increasingly fuelled by capitalised post-settlement entities, extensive natural resources and abundant sources of renewable energy, including Wellington's wind. And so I have boundless confidence in the creativity, capability, ingenuity and work ethic of my fellow New Zealanders. But we must strengthen the foundations for future economic success. An important part of that is sound government finances, and you will see that in the budget on the 30th of May. It will show the government to be a good steward of public money, one that respects taxpayers, the people who get up early in the morning to go to work and earn money for their family, and a government that thinks the right measure of success is not how much money you spend or how much you say you care, but the results that are achieved for New Zealanders. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Yes, please. That would be great.
Just while the Minister grabs some water, thank you for that insight to next week's budget. We're going to do questions for the failed projects, and particularly Auckland Light Rail. Obviously, a lot of people in this room are interested in this notion of an Auckland City deal, and just how we might actually finally get the city moving again. Would you care to comment on that and perhaps how you're approaching that sort of infrastructure funding long term?
Yeah, well, we're committed to investing significant sums in Auckland City across its infrastructure needs. We're working closely with Mayor Wayne Brown and the Council to map out the plan of what that investment needs to look like. Obviously, you've seen us recently reach a major milestone in agreeing a future approach for water care. Look, that's a really significant decision, because what it does is two things. One, it gives Watercare the confidence they will have the borrowing capacity to invest in the significant water infrastructure needed for Auckland's growth. And on the other hand, it will also free up more of Auckland Council's balance sheet so that they can borrow for investments for future growth. That's an example of us, Auckland and Wellington, doing a deal together, and there'll be more of it to come.
Thank you. Now we've got some roving mics. Who's got the first question for me? Mark. And if you can just introduce yourself before you ask the question.
Sure, Mark Thomas from Service Works and the Committee for Auckland. Nicola, Brett and I wrote a session this morning on innovation and knowledge. Actually, two of the things Auckland's not doing that well on, we talk a lot about transport and housing, but the benchmarking shows those two the weakest. And one of the solutions that came was increased R&D spending. And you'll know that we've been increasing that, right? That's been growing. But we're still well behind the OECD average. So can you just share some insight, I suppose, about the government's thinking on where we need to go? And should I say you're doing exactly the right thing with the review of how we spend CRI and tertiary sector? We've got to get more bang for our buck. But this bigger question of don't we need to invest more to get better productivity still remains, I think, to be answered.
Yeah, well, look, I accept the case that where you get greater investment in effective research and development and innovation, you also get greater productivity, you get greater growth, you get more value. So the question becomes, how do we achieve that and make sure any funding uplift is in the right place? There's a role for government and there's a role for the private sector. The government, as you allude to, already makes significant investments in the research and science system. The question our government is rightly asking is, are we getting good bang for that buck? Because I often hear the refrain of businesses who say to me, actually government can be pretty clunky to work with when it comes to the public institutions that are meant to support the commercial application of research and science and technology. We want to make that interface as smooth as possible and ensure that where we as a government are investing with good intentions in R&D, that it's the right stuff and it's helping people like those in this room. The second part is what we do to power up private sector investment. I think partly that is literally about good economic management, because when firms have confidence in the macroeconomic environment, low inflation, stable interest rates, pro-business government, they are more confident to take risks. And often innovation represents risk. It's about being prepared to borrow for the thing that might turn the dial but might not. And that kind of confidence comes from a strong economy. So I do believe there's a strong connection between the two. But we also see a role for government sometimes in working really directly with the private sector. And you've seen that in the government's support of the dollar for dollar matching of investment in methane reduction research in the agricultural sector. I've been really impressed to see not only the people you'd expect, Fonterra and others, step up to invest in that urgent need to get emissions solutions for our farmers, but you've also seen the big commercial banks getting on board too. And I think where we all see joint benefit, there's opportunities for the government and the private sector to co-invest in the big bets that will make a real difference for the particular challenges in this economy.
Thank you. Other questions? Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah Trotman. So Bill English, of course, started a social investment agency. I wonder if you could talk about how yours compares to what he established, and tell us a bit more about the social investment agency, please.
Sure. Can I just tell you that one of the things that makes me really excited for New Zealand is that it is business audiences who always want to talk to me about social investment. And I'll tell you what that tells you. That is the special nature of our small economy, that our businesses are so connected to our communities that you really care about us getting it right for every New Zealander. You want to see better results for those from all walks of life, and you know that we can do it better. So look, the social investment entity that Bill English started was a first step, and what we're doing is we're powering it up. We're turning it into what in government speak is called a central agency, and we're giving it a bit more resource, and we're making it a standalone entity. But I'm not a big believer that it's all about special structures. The most important thing that we're doing is putting the social investment approach at the heart of all government decision making on social spending. And what that means is using evaluation frameworks that actually say, what does the evidence tell us is working? What does the data say will make the biggest difference over the whole course of a child's life? Not just what will tick the right boxes in the report next month or at the end of the financial year, but what's actually going to change that child's life trajectory. So social investment, to me, is the answer to the question so many people ask, which is, why do we as a society invest all that money in putting someone in Palermo prison, when if we just invested that money when they were 6 or 15, we could have made the difference and stopped them ever getting there. And so social investment is about finding those answers, because actually government does a great job of intending to do that. You know, we invest in a lot of early intervention programs and at-risk youth programs. But the sad truth is, a lot of it's not working. So social investment is about saying, let's find the bits that are working, scale them up, and do more of it.
Thank you. Can I just